J'ai 3/4 d'heure, c'est ça? Bon. So, let's switch to English, I guess. So, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch and that you are not ready to sleep. So what I will be talking about today is how to build a mobile application using the Dojo Toolkit. My name is Christophe Jolif, and I'm an IBM software engineer working in the software group. I'm a Dojo Toolkit committer, and I'm basically leading the IBM effort around Dojo, coordinating our contributions to the open source toolkit. I started contributing to Dojo in 2010. I'm a committer since 2011 and working on this overall effort since the end of 2011. I'm contributing mostly to Dojo visual components like the charting framework I've talked about last year at this very same conference. But I'm contributing also on the mobile and application framework side of the Dojo Toolkit, and that's what we will be talking about today. In particular, I have reviewed and committed most of the mobile code in the 1.9 release that happened a month ago. I will try as much as possible to adapt a little bit the presentation to the audience, even if it's not always easy. So just to get a rough idea, how many of you have some experience using the Dojo Toolkit? Okay, so very few. And how many of you have experience building a mobile application with JavaScript? A little bit more. Okay, so I will try to not go too far in the details, and we will see how it goes. So let's have a short introduction to the Dojo Toolkit first. So as I've just said, it's an open source toolkit. It allows you to build web and mobile applications. It's based on the BSD license. The latest stable release is the 1.9 that was issued in May. As you can guess, it's a UI client-side centric library. Everything is done on the client. The code is totally agnostic from the server side or the way the data are transmitted from the server. You can use a Node.js server, PHP, Java, whatever you want. You can use whatever format you want to transmit the data between the client and the server. The components are really client-side and can connect to any type of data. It's very well suited to develop professional applications because it gets some nice features that enterprises are looking for, like full globalization capabilities. You can, for example, create bidirectional display for Arabic or Hebrew. You can use alternate calendaring systems like Chinese ones, things like that. You have very strong support for accessibility as well, including on mobile with voice-over support. And you get a nice object-oriented programming framework that allows you to really architecture your classes and your application around your basically your business objects or your visual objects, depending on which part of the development you're working on. So in Dojo you will find three main packages. The first one is Dojo or Dojo Core. It contains all the core utilities that you need when you're building a web application. In particular, the most important piece of Dojo Core is its AMD loader and its AMD build tool. So AMD is this asynchronous module definition format that allows you to declare modules in JavaScript so that these modules are loaded at runtime. There are several loaders out there like Require.js, for example, but Dojo provides its own loader that is included with Dojo. And the nice thing about this loader is that it's very well integrated with the Dojo build system, meaning that when you will deploy your application for deployment, well, you will be able to basically build your application from all your requiring dependencies, bundling several JavaScript files together, bundling your CSS files together so that you can reduce the number of HTTP requests going to the server to download those files. Obviously, you will find in Dojo Core all what you expect in such a package, like DOM query and manipulation tools, JavaScript utilities, for example, array utilities to iterate over arrays, things like that, promises utilities, requests to the server. And another nice part of Dojo Core is this data abstraction layer, which is called Dojo Store, which is basically a piece of code, a small piece of code that allows you to basically abstract your connection to your data from your UI component to your server. So instead of having your UI components that directly connect to the data of the server, you have this layer, and it has a predefined API with the ability to query objects, to modify objects. And so all your visual components, all your rendering code will talk to this layer. And if one day you need to change your server or the way you transmit data for one reason or another, well, you will just have to switch basically this store implementation and replace it with another one. And you will be able to keep your UI just as it is without to change anything. So that's for Dojo Core. The second package that you will find in Dojo is Digit. Digit is a UI framework of Dojo. It contains all the utilities that allows you to build UI components, starting with a widget class, but also utilities that allows you to, for example, show a tooltip and things like that. On top of this UI framework, you will find in Digit an implementation of actual widgets that are more web-oriented widgets than mobile widgets. We will see in a minute for mobile widgets. So you will find a wide range of widgets, from very simple ones like buttons to more complex ones like, to more complex ones like trees, for example. You will find also some containers or layout components that allows you to basically lay out these widgets on the screen, like accordions, tabs, and so on. And finally, you will find a third package in Dojo, which is called Dojo X, for Dojo extensions. These are basically extensions to both Dojo and Digit, and that are not as mainstream as the other code, and that are placed in this part of Dojo. And you can find a very wide variety of things there. You can find charting components that allows you to plot charts on your screen. You can find full calendaring widgets, like a little bit like the Google Calendar, but just a client-side visual component for that. And you can find also the Dojo mobile components that we will talk about today. So Dojo Mobile. Dojo Mobile is a simple and lightweight framework that allows you to build native-looking mobile web applications. So it's built on top of the Digit UI framework. It extends from the same widget base class and things like that. But on top of that, instead of providing a full framework with relatively heavy wide components, it concentrates on providing you with relatively simple components that fit with the paradigms of the native mobile applications. Nice thing with that is that you can create web applications for that will run in the browser, but as we've seen this morning, then you can embed this code in a container like Cordova, for example, and run them as hybrid applications just as they were native applications. Dojo Mobile comes with 6 predefined themes in the form of CSS style sheets that will basically mock up the rendering of the typical mobile platforms. You can see them all here. This includes in 1.9 a WP8 theming, an Android theming that has been refreshed to follow the HoloDark guidelines, a BlackBerry theming, and an iOS theming. So basically, when you will write a Dojo mobile application, you will do your code, and then to display it based on the platform you will run, you don't have anything to do. Dojo Mobile will take care of that, thanks to a module that is called device theme, and at runtime, depending on the device you are running on, it will pick the WPA theming or the iOS theming or so on. All of this is nice, but some of you might not want that. Some of you might want to get a single theming across all the devices, in particular if you want to adapt it to the guidelines of your customer, for example. And so this is optional. You can obviously use a common theme on all your devices if you want to, and you can customize it to your needs. This is in particular true because we provide you what we call a custom theme that is all written with less and a set of less variables. So you are able to basically customize this less variable and use the less tool to regenerate the CSS that are tailored to your needs. So now that we've seen what Dojo and Dojo Mobile are, well, let's see how you build an application with Dojo Mobile into more details. So just before that, actually, I've probably made a little mistake in my slides. This should be in the other section. So Dojo Mobile provides you this nice theming, and it provides you some widgets. So one more time, there are mostly here relatively simple widgets like button, list, slider. They are the typical widgets that you will find on the native frameworks for the various platforms. It provides also you with a framework to transition between one view to another, so that you can get transitions effects between the view and so on. There are basically two ways of using Dojo Mobile. The first one is to rely on markup instantiation. So when you are creating basically an HTML file, and in this file you are decorating the HTML with some Dojo specific markups. On the slide here you have the typical example of a button. So I'm using an HTML button with a label, and what I'm saying is I'm saying data Dojo type Dojo X mobile button. This means that when the Dojo parser will encounter this button, it will instantiate a JavaScript class, which is in the Dojo X mobile button module. And this JavaScript class will decorate the button, making sure it gets the right behavior for Dojo Mobile, making sure it gets the right CSS styling and so on. So that's the first way of using Dojo and Dojo Mobile here. The second way is to use it in JavaScript. So instead of relying on the markup to instantiate the button on your page, you can do that in JavaScript. And in this case, you will use an AMD loader, presumably the Dojo one, but that can be another one. And the AMD loader provides you with a require function. And this require function is here to basically query a particular AMD module from the server or from your device. And here I'm querying the Dojo X mobile button module. And so the first parameter of the require function is an array of AMD modules, basically. And the second parameter of the require function is a function itself. This function will be called when all the required modules will have been loaded. All of this is done asynchronously. That's why you need this callback function. And the callback function is taking as parameter the result of the loading of each of the modules I've required. Here I've required only one module, which is the Dojo X mobile button module, so I get only one parameter to my function, which is the button class. Once I have this button class, well, I just use a new keyword and I'm passing some parameters to my button. It will be instantiated, and then I can call startup of my buttons to make sure it is started. So these are two ways of using Dojo or Dojo Mobile. And typically in an application, in a real-life application, you will mix both ways. Typically, what is very static on your application will be done in markup, things that are not changing during the lifetime of the application, and things that are more dynamic, like things that are created based on requests from the user or data coming from the server, will probably be created in JavaScript. So that's the application that we will try to build today. If you have an iPhone, an iOS device, you might recognize it's a little bit like the stock application of iOS. Maybe I will show it to you. That's part of my problem. I didn't. Okay. So here we are. So that's the application we want to build today. So you have a list of stock tickets at the top that you can select. And when you select a stock, you will see that the bottom part of the display is refreshed to basically display detailed information about the stock I've just selected. And another nice part is that I can swap here at the bottom to go from news about the stock I selected to some important figures about this stock, and then to a graph showing the evolution of the stock during the last 12 months. So that's basically what we will see how to build today. And you will see it's not that, well, it's not a big application obviously, but we could expect it to be still relatively difficult, and actually it's not that difficult. So what is the first thing you need to do if you want to use Dojo Mobile to build such an application? The first thing is obviously to import Dojo so that it is available for you to build the application, to create the application. So you do that by just referencing the dojo.js file, as I've done that. And on the contrary of some other frameworks that provides you a single JavaScript file with everything in it and you just import it and you're done, Dojo is far more modular thanks to this notion of AMD module. So when you're importing dojo.js, you are basically only importing 4K, which is the Dojo loader. This is the loader that will allow you to load other modules of Dojo. So you do that just as that. You can pass some additional parameters to the loader when you are importing it. Through the data dojo config parameter. Here in this case I'm passing a few properties. The first one is pass on load true. This means that if you created part of your application in markup, decorating it, you have two ways then of parsing this markup. Either you do it manually by calling the parser yourself in JavaScript, or you let the parser be called automatically at lunchtime. And that's what I'm saying here. I say, hey, when you will run first the application, please parse it. I don't want to do it myself. The second parameter here is async true. This is to make sure that the Dojo loader is working in asynchronous mode so that I can load as many files as I can in parallel. And the third parameter here is MB always hide address bar. So that's a mobile specific parameter. It will not be useful if you embed your application in a Cordova container in the end. But if you are running it in a browser, you might want to hide the address bar so that users have the full screen for your application. And if you want that, you can use this parameter. So now that we have Dojo in our application, we need to start coding with it. What we will do is that we will first basically define the main layout, the main frame of our application in markup with Dojo Mobile. That's what I'm doing here on the slide. So if you well remember, the application had two very different parts. The top part with the list of stocks, and the bottom part with the details. And that's what we are doing here. We are using a Dojo mobile container, which is called the fixed splitter. And using this container, we are able to basically determine several areas on the screen where we will have sub-containers. So we will have a first pane, the Dojo X mobile container here, that will take 66%, well, two-thirds part of the screen. That will be for the list of stocks. And then at the bottom, we have another container that will take the remaining space to display the detailed information for a particular stock. Another interesting point to note here is the style attribute that I've put on the body here. So as we said before, Dojo Mobile has this nice CSS theming that adapts to the mobile platform you are running on. If you're using this mechanism, the CSS theming might not be loaded early enough in the lifetime of the application when you're running on a mobile device, and so you might get a first rendering without the native look and feel, and then a refresh with the native look and feel. In order to avoid this nasty behavior, you can just set the visibility to hidden when launching the application so that you don't get two renderings. Dojo Mobile will make sure to set back the visibility to visible in time for you. So you don't have to care about reverting the visibility flag later on. You just care about setting visibility hidden at first, and then we will make sure for you to put it back visible when we will be ready to be rendered. So now that we have this basic picture with the top part and the bottom part, we need to fill those parts, those containers. So let's start with the top part of the screen. So if you remember, it was a list of stock tickets, and well, in real life, that list might be of an indefinite size. You don't know in advance. It depends on how many stocks your user want to display. And so we need a container that will allow the user to scroll the list in order to show more than what the screen can see, can show in that relatively small area. And so for that, we're using yet another Dojo X mobile container, which is a scrollable view, and that gives this scrollable behavior. So we have an area that we can scroll. We need to put a list of items in there. So for that, I'm using the round rect list, which is a Dojo X mobile list of items with round rect corners. And I can set, still through the data Dojo props attribute, some properties on this list. Here I'm setting the stateful property on the list. This means that the list will remember the selection state of the items over time. There are tons of parameters on the list that you can use here. So obviously we will need to fill in the list, because here we have the list but it is empty. We won't do that statically, we won't do that in the markup, because the list of stocks is coming from the server or from the memory of the device. So I don't know in advance when I'm creating my application which will be the stocks that will be displayed. So I will do that in JavaScript later on, and we will see. So that's for the top part. Now let's see the bottom part. On the bottom part, we had these three views that you could swipe using your finger. And so we need to basically create not six, but three views corresponding to the three views that I can swipe. The first one, and for that I'm using the swap view object of Dojo Mobile. As soon as you use a swap view, it will automatically listen for the right gesture. You just have to use a swap view, and we will make sure that when you are swiping over it, it will provide you with the ability to go from one view to another. So the first swap view is another list, because it's a list of all the news about the stock that I have selected. Same thing here. I'm creating the list object statically because it will always be here, but I will create the content of the list dynamically later on. The second view is about all this detailed information about the stock, like the opening price, the closing price, and things like that. Here I will just, it's not really a list, it's like a table. But I want some rounded corners still around it, like on the list. So I'm using a round rect object in Dojo Mobile that will provide me with a container with this rounding corner. And we will see later on what I will put in there. Finally, The third view is the chart with the evolution of the stock price over the last 12 months. Same thing, I'm using a stock view. I want some rounded corners, so I'm using the round rect, and we will see later on how to create the history chart. The last part is, if you well remember, even below the swap views, you had these 3 little dots that were showing basically which swap view is currently selected, that you can see at the bottom here. And so we need something for that as well. This is what Dojo Mobile calls a page indicator. So I have this page indicator component that I'm putting at the bottom of my fixed splitter. And this page indicator will automatically connect to the swap views and listen to the transitions on the swap views and make sure to correctly refresh which page indicator should be shown. So you just have to put the component and it will do the job for you, basically. So now let's see how we fill the second and third swap view. So the second one is detailed statistics about the stock, like opening price and so on. So I have this round rect. Basically in it I will just use a plain HTML table. I could use whatever I want here, any HTML, any Dojo Mobile. For simplicity I've used a table, so I'm just using a table, putting some IDs on the cells of the table so that I can get them from the JavaScript, and I will make sure to fill the information in JavaScript later on. For the chart, it will be the first time in the presentation where I will not use a Dojo Mobile widget, but another widget from Dojo, which is a charting widget here. But it's used exactly the same way. So instead of saying my div data Dojo type equal a Dojo Mobile class, I'm using the same thing, but I'm referencing a Dojo X charting class, which is a chart class. And I'm passing some parameters to my chart to define its axes, its series, and so on. So one more time here, I'm creating statically the chart, but I will feed it with the data later on. So we have imported dojo.js, we have all our HTML static markup. What do we miss? We miss some JavaScript, obviously. So I'm creating a source src.js file that I'm importing in my application. What do I need to put in this file? It depends a little bit. We have used all these classes in the markup, like Dojo X Mobile Fixed Splitter, Dojo X Mobile Swap View, and so on. But we've never imported those modules into the application, really. So there are two cases. In Dojo, you have basically two markup parsers. You have the full markup parser from Dojo Core, and you have a smaller, lighter markup parser in Dojo X Mobile. If you are using the full parser, you can basically ignore all the imports that are in white on the slide, because the full parser is smart enough to go into your markup, look at the classes or modules that you are using, and import them automatically for you. So you don't have to import them manually as I'm doing here. If you're using the Dojo Mobile parser, you have to do that manually because it's not as smart. Then you will ask me, which parser should I use? Well, the answer really depends on what your constraints are. The Dojo Mobile parser is lighter to download. It's a little bit faster also. So basically, I would say if you're doing a web application where basically the code will be downloaded each time the user is using the application, then you might want to use a Dojo Mobile parser because it's lighter. If you are embedding your application in a Cordova container to run the application as an hybrid or native application on your device, it will be downloaded only once, the first time the user installs the application. So you can probably pay the price of using the full parser in order to get rid of this additional require. You don't really want to bother requiring, basically. But in addition to these things that are optional, if you are using the full parser, you still have to require some other classes that you have not used in the markup, but that you will use in the JavaScript. There are several ones here. Three that I will highlight. The first one is Dojo Ready. This is a module that allows you to know when your application is ready, when the DOM has been loaded in memory, when the DOM has been parsed. The second one is a digit registry, which allows you to basically get a widget from your widget list in memory. And the third one is a Dojo X mobile list item, which is basically the items that you put in lists, and we need to build them, if you remember, so we need that module. So what I'm doing is that I'm saying, hey, when I'm ready, so when I have the DOM that is ready and when it has been parsed, I want to get in the registry the stocks and the news widgets that I've created in the markup. So then, once I've done that, in my stocks and in my news variable, I have references to these two widgets. So what else? So I need to get data from my server or from a file on my device if I'm using Cordova. In particular, I need to get the list of stocks that I want to display. So here I'm using another Dojo core module, which is Dojo Requests, that allows me to do requests to get data. In particular here, I'm getting some JSON data. I'm saying handle as JSON so that it returns me with a JSON object. So I'm doing this request and I'm saying, hey, the keyword here is then, but it means when the request will be ready, will be back, please call my function here. And in my function, I will basically receive some data that looks like that, with an ID for each stock, with a title, with a price, and with the change value during the day, for example. So now that I have this data, I need to fill my top list, which is a list of my stock items. So for that, I'm just iterating over the live array. And for each item in my array, I'm creating a list item. I'm setting several parameters on it. One interesting one is the onClick parameter. The onClick parameter is basically referencing a function that will be called, a callback function that will be called each time I click or I touch, more exactly on a touch device, the list item. I'm also setting the ID of the stock so that I can get it later. Once I have created my list item, I just add it to my stocks list and it will be displayed in the list. So what about the item, the details function, callback function? Well, the details callback function, I need to basically fill in the details in the swap view at the bottom. So I'm just getting the idea that is in my context here. And I'm doing one more request to my server to get more data. In this case, the news, the day, and the history. I'm basically doing very similar things with my three subviews. For the first one, I'm iterating over the news, creating more list items and adding those list items to the news list. Then I'm iterating over my data in order to fill my data table. And finally, I'm calling the update series method on my chart, passing it the data history array in order to basically update the history of the chart. And that's really all I have. With these few lines of code, I'm able to update the three swap views that I've created in the markup at the beginning of the presentation. So what is missing? I have the markup, I have the JavaScript, I'm just missing the CSS. So here what I'm using is I'm using the device theme. So as I've told you at the beginning of this presentation, it's optional. You could just reference some CSS files that will style your Dojo mobile widgets. But here I want the style to change based on my device, so I'm using this device theme module. And I'm passing it the name of the classes I want to be styled. There is an option to device theme, which is the MBL user agent property here. Using this, I can, for example, force a particular platform rendering even for all the devices. For example, if I want to render like on iOS on every device, I can put iPhone here, and it will be rendered like on iOS on every device it will be distributed to. So we don't have a lot of time, so let me try to rush. So that's all I need. I mean, I have the application working. It can be looked at in a browser just doing that. Now you might want to go further. In particular, you might want to use a Dojo build tool in order to gather your CSS file and a JavaScript file, because for now I've used like maybe 25 or 30 JavaScript modules, and this will mean that I will query 30 JavaScript files from the server. It might not be very good, so I might want to bundle them all, and the Dojo build tool allows you to do that. The second thing is it's still a web application. It's not a real mobile application. I can't deploy it on the device. But for that, well, you've basically seen this morning how you can do that with Cordova. You just basically create a Cordova project. You embed all your JavaScript or your CSS, HTML in it, and you can just run it on the device. Actually, that's not the application that we've just seen, but I have this example of a Dojo application. So that's a contact application. Same thing, mocking up a little bit the iOS application with the search functionality in there. So it's here, it's deployed on Cordova, running on the emulator. And the nice thing is that with Cordova, you can then access some of the native things on the device. For example, here, if I'm adding another attendee, another guy in my contact list here, okay. So it's showing up here, obviously. But as I've used the Cordova API for that, if I'm going to the contacts native application, you will see that this exact same attendee have been added here. So that's really nice. And actually, I have a project on GitHub which is dCordova. It's very experimental for now, but it creates some wrappers around some Cordova API in order to better work in an AMD fashion. In particular, I've talked to you about this Dojo store layer, and in Cordova you don't have this notion, but you have things that can very be like a store, like for example the contact list, and I've created implementations of Dojo store above the Cordova API, basically. The entire code of the stock application that I've just shown is also available on GitHub at the URL here, so I engage you to look at it. I wanted to introduce today, but I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, another part of Dojo, which is the application framework of Dojo. Let's do it very quickly. So here we have seen how to build a Dojo mobile application, basically just using the UI components, doing everything yourself from the UI components. That said, when you are creating a bigger application, it might start to be a bit complex. So you might want to rely on an application framework, which is basically a little bit above the UI framework, which provides you a notion of views, a notion of controllers, of data binding and things like that. And Dojo provides you with an application framework that is in Dojo XApp, Dojo Application Framework. You might want to give it a look at it as well. It's totally agnostic, actually. This application framework can be used with Dojo Mobile, it can be used with Digit, but you can use it with jQuery or whatever other UI framework you want to use. It's nice. I do have an example application, which is a contacts app that we've just seen in the iPhone emulator. Same thing on GitHub. So when you have a big application, it's really good because it allows you to, as you can see here, on a JSON file to structure your application, define controllers for your views. It deals also with the multi-channel aspects, allowing you to specify parameters like the one in magenta here, saying, hey, if I'm running on a mobile device, let's do that, or do something else on a desktop device, and so on. Let's rush. So a bit of introduction about the future. So I've talked here about Dojo Mobile 1.9, which is from May. The next major milestone is Dojo 2.0 in early 2014. The idea of Dojo 2.0 is to make sure that Dojo is not as monolithic as today. So the nice thing with Dojo is that it really covers everything. Whatever you want, you find it in there. But it's very, very big, so it's sometimes a bit difficult to find your way in it. Dojo 2.0 is aiming at solving this issue by basically making sure all the Dojo important parts are splitted out like a charting project, for example, instead of just a module in Dojo X. And each of these projects will have their own life as separated project, but from time to time we will bundle of this project, test them together, make sure they are working fine together, and still produce a big distribution of the Dojo toolkit. In terms of UI, what we are looking at for 2.0 is trying to converge as much as possible the mobile widgets and the desktop widget. Because for now, a lot of our people are looking at building applications that are working both on mobile and desktop. They don't know which one to pick. They have to learn a little bit different ways of doing things with the mobile and the desktop framework. So the idea is, in 2.0, we will try to merge them as possible. Obviously, we will still have some specific theming or behaviors for mobile, but the main core of the widgets will be identical. There might be still some widgets that will be desktop only, some mobile only, but our aim is to converge as much as possible in order to get a single entry point for whatever UI you want to build. This work is done on GitHub at the reference here. Like 2 weeks ago, so it's really early. Actually, there's no real merge for now. We have just in the same GitHub all the code, and we will starting now just to try to merge things. If you want to look at it, provide feedback, same thing. We are very interested in that. I don't know if there is some remaining time for questions, but if there's not, I will be around anyway. So thanks a lot.